And if you're just joining us, thanks for being here with our Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network Lunch and Learn for March. We're excited to take a deep dive into finding funding for culvert right sizing and replacement. And we'll just give folks one more minute to join. And if you can open up the chat box, make sure it's clicked to go to everyone and just introduce yourself so we can see who's in the Zoom room with us today, where you all are coming from, and what roles you have in your communities. So I'll go ahead and get started with a couple of Flood Resilience Network updates and announcements while we're waiting for a few more folks to join. Our next Lunch and Learn is scheduled for Thursday, April 9th, and we're excited to feature a new USGS stream gauge that's been installed on the tidal Rondout Creek in Kingston. So we'll have presentations from the City of Kingston, USGS, and the Stevens Institute of Technology to talk about how the project came to be, advice on installing a USGS stream gauge if anyone is interested in installing one in your community, and how the gauge will be used for a local flood forecast system to help the City of Kingston get the word out about possible flooding. So that's April 9th, and Jess just put in the chat the link to register if you'd like to join us for that one. In June, save the date for June 11th, we have another Lunch and Learn focused on building trust with community-based organizations. And we're really excited to bring in speakers from the Climate Migration Network, along with tribal leaders from coastal Louisiana who are really on the front lines of this work. And they'll have lessons learned and advice for Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network members on working with community-based organizations on flooding issues. We're excited to have a great cohort for our upcoming Land Use Leadership Alliance training in Hudson this April and May. So thanks to everyone who is joining that cohort. We're glad to be repeating that program. This fall, keep an eye out for our site visit. This is our in-person meeting where we'll tour flood resilience practice on the ground. We're looking at some possible dates in September for that, and also the upcoming risk and emergency crisis communications training, which will be held in Westchester County and another in Columbia County. We offered this program in collaboration with Dr. Danielle Eisman from Cornell University last year. It was a big hit, and if you're interested in risk and crisis communications before, during, and after a flood, highly recommend you attend this training. Lastly, the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network is now a member of the American Flood Coalition. We're really glad to join this national network that will provide more resources, opportunities, and help us connect with other groups working on similar issues. So we'll be receiving periodic emails and updates from them with information and opportunities, and we'll be passing those on to Flood Resilience Network members as well, in case there's anything that you'd like to pursue. Great. And so with that, we will get today's Lunch and Learn underway. And I'd like to first hand it off to Mayor of Piermont, Nathan Michell.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Nathan Michell. I am the mayor of Piermont and also the chair of our Waterfront Resiliency Commission. And I'm pinch hitting this afternoon for Sylvia Welch, our grant writer, who I've worked closely with through PWRC for the last 7 or 8 years, working on funding projects, including culverts that can improve our outcomes in storm events. So I think the most important takeaway that I have from the work that we've done together is the value of pre-planning and having information consolidated and on hand before any particular grant opportunity arises. So one of the projects we worked on was we received FEMA brick funding for upsizing a culvert from our Erie path down into a downhill portion of our stormwater management system where we had a washout during Ida. And what was key to that, and is key to a number of these competitive funding applications, is being able to document a cost benefit or benefit cost analysis with a ratio of 1 or greater. So what that means, simply put, is that you need to show that this project will reduce damages in at least the amount of the cost of the project itself. And that's the total project cost, including engineering and everything involved with permitting, and actually in this case legal fees associated with getting easements out of property owners, because we need to route this culvert in an area that we don't previously have easements on. So you're never going to get a FEMA grant if you can't show that benefit cost of one or more. And ways that we work to put that information together included doing a mailing to specific addresses in our community that we knew were in the X zone, and asking them to produce documentation of repair work that they had to do over the course of the last 10 years or so. And this was a little bit of a sticky conversation. And one of the things Emily mentioned was about building trust with residents, with neighbors. And that is a key component here, because when you start asking people for that type of information, they get concerned it's going to somehow affect their property value or their taxes, or they needed permits or something like that. And in reality, we're just doing it in good faith because we need to be able to go to FEMA with a stack of bills that are, taller than what we're asking them to fund in terms of construction. So that pre-planning work, I think, is the easiest thing to overlook. When there is an event, everybody scrambles and says, okay, so what can we do about this right now? But it takes months to put all that information together. And it takes having, sometimes tense conversations with residents who have been impacted that don't, that feel that it's private and don't really want to discuss it. So the time to do that is not when an event occurs. However, whenever there is a state of emergency declared in New York State, that sets up a tranche of funding that is for dealing with that declared emergency event, that typically doesn't all get spent in the days and weeks directly after the event, and then becomes available for funding. So if you have something on the shelf where you have identified specific areas that require improvements, and you've mapped out the properties that could be damaged without that improvement in stormwater management, and you have some documentation about what the value of those properties are, what previous damages have occurred at those locations, and also, of course, your municipal bills from the DPW doing repair work on village property or town property. All of that gets in the BCA stack. And if you have that all ready to go, after a month or so after a declared emergency, there typically will be this opportunity to apply for leftover funding. And that's how we ended up getting one of the culvert grants that we're currently working with in Piermont. It was just a matter of essentially having something on the shelf that was ready to go, that wasn't specifically oriented towards any one funding source. It was, we can apply to any competitive funding source with this information and with this benefit cost analysis. And then the other thing that I would also share, I don't know if every community is this way, but Piermont happens to have a lot of our infrastructure not actually be owned by the Village of Piermont. So we have a state road that travels through town, and we have a county road that borders the town. And that infrastructure, and there's another county road that's up on the hill. And so improvements to culverts and stormwater management in the Village of Piermont require cooperation with partner agencies, with the county, with the State Department of Transportation. And we have actually been quite successful in the past. Directly after Ida, the county was about to start a repaving project of their county road that happened to entail replacing a culvert. And we met with them and we showed them some numbers and some pictures of damage that had occurred at this location of this culvert. And in a miraculous turn of fate, the giant bureaucratic county machine was able to, in a 2-month window, go back and redesign this culvert to have 3 times the capacity of the one that they had been planning on installing, and get it funded and included in that project. So I've worked on projects where we talk about it for 5 years before anything ever actually happens, and, shovel goes in the dirt. And this was a really phenomenal example of a situation where if you time it right, and if you know what you need, and you can express that in an intelligent and documented way, you can get other people, other agencies that have some role in your community to also update their plans. And so that is something that I would say everyone should be advocating to all of those partner agencies, whether it's a sewer district or a water district or it's just the transportation infrastructure. A lot of culvert and catchment stuff happens within the transportation infrastructure, so don't ignore that aspect of it. And I think that's about all that I can really share in terms of our experience in Piermont. So at this point, I would like to either hand it back to Emily or off to Colleen. And
Yeah,
we will have questions at the end, I believe. Is that correct?
that's exactly right. Thanks so much, Nate. So we are going to next hand it over to Colleen Lutz, the town supervisor from the town of Ancram, and then we'll have Q&A and discussion after both presentations.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me get this all queued up here. Okay, thank you, Emily and Jess, for having me come and take a redive into our stream and culvert restoration project, which we did way back in 2015. So I had to dust off my presentations and just to try to share kind of the project that we undertook and how it is now, and maybe some talk about and discussion about where we can go from here. This is just kind of a look at one of our wetlands. I apologize, the picture is a little bit old, but we have quite a bit of, we're very rural, as you can see, a lot of farmland, some forested area, but we also have a lot of water features. This is a map showing the water features in Ancram. And anything in blue are DEC regulated wetlands. Green are the NWI, so that's the National Wetland Inventory wetlands. And then anything that you see in brown, they're hydric soils. So there's a potential that there could be water there as well. So we have a very large part of the Rojan Kill. And so that kind of goes through, and the Punch Brook as well, go through our town and impact a lot of our area. Here are some of the flood hazards. Now, we have not updated our FEMA flood map since the 1980s. Because we don't have a lot of built infrastructure, there isn't a lot of flood hazard, like direct hazard areas, but it's definitely time to update that. So we're hoping to do that in the next few years. The red areas are 100-year flood zones. And if you were to kind of compare the two maps that I show, they kind of overlay each other pretty well. So luckily in those areas, there's actually a lot of farming, which could be unlucky depending on what type of farming they do and how they, if they're responsible. But there is a lot of farming in our town that is kind of directly adjacent to the waterways. So how did we get started on this journey? Actually, a lot of this stuff that was happening, we'll call it behind the scenes, we were kind of later to the game back in 2015. Basically, the Estuary program, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Estuary program, reached out to us and said, hey, we did this really cool project where we went through and we did a study to look at the different road crossings that are in your town. And as you can see, it also goes into the town of Gallatin, Pine Plains. This is just looking at the Punch Brook and Chicomico sub watersheds. And they said, we actually went through and for a couple of seasons, we went and we measured your culverts. We determined to sign a kind of an idea of what condition they were in and what kind of storms they could pass. So, and what kind of, biological information, meaning, what kind of organisms could pass through your culverts, which was also really important as well. So they gave us this beautiful map. They gave us a wonderful spreadsheet, which has all of this data in it, and said, here, maybe you could use this to determine if you can apply for funding through the Estuary program to maybe upsize some of your culverts and make them passable to wildlife and for higher stream flows. So we said, okay, let's give it a try. And basically, from taking that spreadsheet that you saw on the right, we kind of did an internal prioritization of what kind of crossings we would want to kind of look at. And we also pulled in our DPW and said, hey, are there any areas that you find have either in the past been a flooding issue or are in need of repair? Perhaps we could kind of piggyback, see if they fall into maybe a severely undersized or severely impassable for aquatic organisms. Maybe we'll find some that kind of cross those two zones, and we can apply for funding to actually repair them and replace them and make them a bit more passable for future water flows and for organisms. And luckily, we were able to find 3 to start with that kind of fit both areas. They kind of, were at the corner, at the intersection of those 2 things. So we started with 2 of them. This is the first one we started with. And this is just a drawing from our engineer of what we proposed to do at this crossing. And the next slides will show you why we chose to actually do this. We call it the Pat's Road Culvert. That this is actually the culvert that was being replaced. And this photo was taken in March of 2016 to show some of the deficiencies in the crossing. For one, it's a corrugated steel metal round culvert. It was put in, I think, maybe in the 1970s or so. It's it is wet all the time. So there is water flowing through it all the time. And so it was actually, what was happening is the picture on the right is it was sinking and the asphalt was starting to degrade. There was actually a hole starting on the picture on the right, which you can see. And so the road was starting to shift and sink and becoming a safety hazard. And this was also considered undersized and a barrier to aquatic passage. So we applied for funding. We received the funding. We had the design. And now work has to start. And so this is the beginning. This is what it looked like when everything greened up. So August of 2026 or 2016, excuse me. And it's as you can see, it's actually a there's a residence right there. So we are starting to, in this picture, tear up the road at this residence, basically. So that involved a lot of landowner kind of negotiations and an understanding that we were going to be basically disabling the road at that point, which the landowner acknowledged and were actually happy with this design. And this just is to show you that construction is kind of ugly, and it was actually very, a lot of people didn't realize, I think, the magnitude of what we were dealing with here. One thing we found is that the water table was extremely high where the footings of this culvert or this box culvert needed to be. So it was hard for them to actually dewater the site and to get it to the depth where they needed it to be. So they ended up having to elevate it a little bit more than they wanted to, but it didn't affect the integrity of the design at all. But learning and looking back, I think we would have probably drawn more test holes just to see where the water was at that time. We drew a few, but not as many as probably we should have. Okay, and then it continues on. And now this is a rural country road, and people are seeing all of, this construction. In this picture, you can see the old culvert, and this is where they're putting the footings for the new box concrete culvert. So this involved a lot of communication with the community, letting them know that the road is still closed and here is what is happening. It also involved a lot of sediment control and they had to continuously pump the water around so that they maintained stream flow. So it was kind of a big deal. And here's just another picture of construction again. And then finally in September, we finished. So this was a final project, what it looked like prior to planting. And so we said, well, we've got to plant this because we have to stabilize the banks sides. So we went and applied through the Trees for Trips program, which I'm sure many of you know about. We showed them the designs and they got to see, it sent us a whole slew of plants for us to put in to stabilize the actual banks of the culvert. And we were gracious enough to have someone on our CAC, Conservation Advisory Council, who was able to create a design for us, which also helped us buy some additional plant materials to kind of make the area even more vegetated because it is right at a residence. And then we had some volunteers come in, and luckily it was a group of students that from the local high school that wanted to do a community service project. So I said, I've got a project for you. You can learn how to plant plants, and also you will be helping the town out greatly by giving us some extra work, volunteer work. Again, here's another shot of the culvert. So we went from that tiny corrugated steel culvert to what they call a concrete cast box culvert, open bottom. And this is what it looks like now. I took these pictures this morning. So I can see it's hard because a lot of the plants that we planted aren't, the deciduous plants aren't greened up yet. But the evergreens that we planted are doing their job. They're kind of disguising this so it doesn't look as industrial to the homeowners that live nearby, and kind of trying to camouflage it. This is the second culvert that we did. This was on a different farm road, and very similar type of design, except it's slightly skewed. And this is what this looked like. And this is what it looks like today. So it was a same type of old, corrugated steel culvert. And we went ahead and opened it up and made it so that it was passable to invertebrates and a much higher ability or much greater ability to take higher stream flows. So this kind of summarizes where we're at. Both of the culverts have been done. To get an idea, the total project cost between the two of them was $256,400. We had a grant from the Estuary program for $220,000. So the town cost was $36,400 for the two concrete box culverts, and that includes the engineering and planting and everything. And then from there, we worked again with the Estuary program, received another smaller grant to work with Trout Unlimited and Cornell Cooperative Extension to take all of those culverts that were in that spreadsheet I showed earlier and create an inventory document and an AGOL map to kind of make it easier for us to take that spreadsheet and all that great information into an easier, digestible, searchable document so that we can actually find some next priorities that we can make. And on the left is our AGOL map that Trout Unlimited worked with, and kind of categorizing all the crossings. And then on the right, Cornell Cooperative Extension created this. It's actually quite a large document that actually takes all of that spreadsheet information and lays it out in a user-friendly, easy way to look at it and at each crossing. And whether we like it or not, Extreme weather events are becoming frequent. Undersized culverts are costly and require more maintenance, repair, replacement. Grant funding is available. We took advantage of the estuary programs grant funding, but as they were saying, there's other avenues to get funding to replace some of your undersized culverts. And here's my contact info. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Colleen. It's really exciting to look back at the 10-year horizon that these have lasted over the past decade, and just to really understand some of those lessons learned, those partnerships, the way that these kinds of projects can be sort of scaffolded and reinforce some of those planning to implementation mechanisms over time. So before we jump into Q&A, I wanted to introduce Jim Katz from the Hudson River Estuary Program. And Colleen mentioned some of the tools and resources and data that's available from the estuary program, along with the funding that actually was used to replace those culverts. And so Jim wanted to give you an opportunity to just introduce yourself and maybe update us quickly on the estuary program's role in moving this work forward.
Thanks, Emily. This was a little before my time, but I have visited both of these sites a few times, and they're still passing all of the water that they're supposed to be, it seems like, and debris as well. I've seen debris in them and then gone back and seen debris that's moved through them, so they're doing a good job over there. Um, yeah, like you guys have mentioned, we have a kind of like a project pipeline that we've set up where we help municipalities fund not only the construction, but we also try and help you fund the planning and design of these projects so that you can apply for larger implementation funds. So kind of setting projects up for future work so that, like Nathan mentioned, you have things ready in the queue, and you're not trying to apply for grants the year they come out, because that we all know that's tough, and that everybody has capacity issues, and we're just trying to avoid that and help you guys prepare. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I can put my contact information in the chat.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Jim. So I saw one question in the chat box, so that'll kick us off here. And then if you have questions, you can feel free to raise your hand and come off and ask those questions, or again, feel free to use the chat box and ask those, and we'll get those to our presenters. So, okay, so the first question was for Colleen, and you mentioned, I think it was that Pat's Road closure. How long was the road closed during that culvert construction project?
Good question. So it was roughly 6 weeks. It was a 6-week project. That I will say, it probably, if we hadn't had the water issues that we did, having some, it was hard to de-water the site enough to get down far enough, and then finding that the water table was a little higher. So it probably took them a little bit longer than it should. So the Pat's Road one took about 6 weeks, and I believe the Hall Hill one took closer to 4, which is probably, with a construction of that size, that's probably more realistic. So probably like 4 weeks.
Thank you. And I know with rural roads, when one road is closed, it can be really challenging for residents and others to get from place to place. Was there any pushback or challenges around those roads being closed? Did you have to work with residents to let them know about this upcoming change?
Yeah, so we started probably in April of that year. So April to May, really kind of letting people know that this was going to happen, kind of getting the word out that we were going to be, closing the road from a certain time. And that was another consideration of why we chose the ones that we chose that were having structural issues, because they are kind of like connector roads. So Hall Hill, or the Pat's Road, connects to State Route 82. So that's a state route, and another highly traveled route with businesses that kind of goes right along the paper mill. And so we wanted to replace that, so we didn't get in a problem, have a large storm, knock the old culvert out, and then we would be, weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, months. So it's a lot of homeowner engagement, so making sure that the properties around there understand what's going on, a lot of community engagement. There was some pushback because I think that it was kind of jarring for people to see. So it's nice to share photos like I had, so you can share that with um, your team or your area to understand it's jarring, but it's also construction and it's not going to be that way the whole time. So we kept saying that to people. I know this looks horrible, but we are going to clean this up and it will look different when it's done. So
Great, thank you. We've got a question here for Nate in the chat about the grant you got from FEMA. Was the grant you got from the emergency declaration matching?
I believe so. And so my recollection is that our process was we put in an application to the BRIC program, and the application was accepted but not funded. And then subsequent to that, there were two different declared emergencies that had leftover funds. And so the state, and I'm not sure exactly the mechanism, cobbled together into one big fund the remnants of those two different declared emergencies and made that available to fund projects that were already in queue with BRIC at the federal level. And so Jim also touched on this, but having things in queue, putting in applications, even if you're not sure where you're going to get the matching funds from, it can have benefits because surprise money can come up down the line after declared emergencies where all the funds haven't been dispersed yet. And I should also note that funding, we did have a match for the village, but it was only a 10% match, and it was a match that could be funded out of other federal funds. And so we got during COVID some ARPA money that we were able to earmark for the matching on this grant. And so, it really was a jigsaw puzzle, and it took a couple of years to just go from putting pen to paper for an application and actually having some prospect of it being funded. And it's taken a couple more years since then to try to get through the easement issues. But yes, it did eventually get funded from leftover emergency declaration funds.
Thanks, Nate. And I see a note in the chat from John Wilkinson from Dishes in New York State that you can reach out with any FEMA hazard mitigation culvert project grant questions. Thank you so much, John, for offering that. I don't know if you want to come off mute and describe your role in that at all. Don't have
Oh,
to.
sure. It's not fair just to hide behind a chat.
It's an
Yeah,
interactive meeting. Yeah, thank
yeah.
you.
And nice work, Nathan. You made some really good points there. Um, yeah, so our office handles the applications for those grants, and Nathan was correct. It doesn't hurt to put in the application, and they do often take a long time. As much planning and background as you can get on the project is very helpful, but we'll help move things along. It's very important that a community that's interested in this kind of grant has an updated hazard mitigation plan, and we have planners that can help with that. And it's not that hard. You can just add an action to your action items, and that will make you potentially eligible for the grants. There's a couple things to keep in mind. There is the potential for pre-award costs, so work that's going to be done to prepare the grant can sometimes be an eligible cost, but that has to be proposed ahead of time and approved as an eligible cost. You also want to keep in mind that the benefit cost analysis is terribly important, but that management costs can be applied for up to 5% of the total project costs, and they do not apply towards the BCA number. So a lot of people don't always remember to do that, and then they're left not able to reimburse their staff or handle their staff work. So those are kind of the main things. And also, if you're going to ask for a FEMA grant, refer to the culvert project as an upgrade and not just a replacement.
Great. Thanks so much for those tips, John.
Mhm.
Jess, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering, it sounds like in Colleen's experience, she was approached by the Estuary program that had assessed, the area. And I'm wondering if there's communities that haven't gotten that assessment, if there's any way that they can request that, or if there's like a, priority list for how that's going down, because I know it's a huge effort to assess all these culverts through the watershed. So maybe that's more of a question for Jim.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I do some assessment work. However, I don't do municipality-wide assessments like that for this specific type of, for that. We do fund those, and we often, reach out to partners like Trout Unlimited, who's done a lot of work in Columbia and Rensselaer County, because of the type of waters that are up there. So, um, working with other partners to coordinate the work and then apply for a grant is how most of the towns have completed these assessments. These road stream crossing management plans is what we call them. Um, and there are about 43 or so in the Hudson Valley that have been completed. So if anybody wants to see, a more recent example, I'm happy to share those.
Yeah, we also can support engineering studies, H&H studies. Basically, there's a couple communities that have um, studies going on to determine, how to deal with their 100-year floodplain. So, those are always possibilities as well. And while there are very few sources of federal funding that can be used with our projects, if there's work that from state funding that will coordinate, that's also really, really helpful to communities.
I'll also add one more thing that Jared and I are trying to work to collect a list of priority projects throughout the Hudson Valley. So if you do have specific crossings that you already know you want to work on, um, I can come out and assess a specific crossing, if it hasn't been assessed. And these assessments are done through the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative. They have a specific protocols that assess for aquatic passage, and then we use that data. Jared has a model that has been developed at Cornell to determine the largest storm that the crossing can pass. So that data is used to then prioritize them. So
Yeah, and I will say too, I just put a link in the chat as well. So NAC is changing; it's being merged into a national program. So they do have some really great mapping resources there, the aquatic barriers. So NAC will be NAC still, but with one A. And I did put a link in the chat as well for a map that I created for the Hudson for all the road stream crossings, plus a bunch of additional data. So it does have assessed and unassessed, and there's more to come with that. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Jared. And I'll just add too that there's so many culverts that have been assessed in the region, and the Estuary program is doing an amazing job getting people out, measuring these pieces of infrastructure, getting that data over to Cornell, really understanding the flood flows and the aquatic connectivity impacts of these culverts. And so, municipalities, if you're interested in getting that information, make sure you go to that NAC. Is that streamcontinuity.org, or it sounds like it's aquaticbarriers.org is the new one, to check and see if culverts have been assessed in your communities, because there may be new data available. I know I was just working with the Fishkill Creek Watershed Alliance that just did a whole suite of culvert assessments in the Fishkill Creek watershed this summer. And so there may be new data available that the municipality itself didn't collect, but that other partners have now added to that database. So make sure you take a look at that too. And then a related question, is there another round of funding for the Trout Unlimited inventories coming out this year?
it's not specific to Trout Unlimited. So that was the partner that worked with these specific towns in Columbia and Rensselaer County. So whether or not they have the capacity to do that this year, I'd have to follow up and find out. But if that is something that you'd like to do, please feel free to reach out to me. We do have our stewardship grant opportunity, which will be coming out later this fall. They're switching from spring to fall, we've been told, for our grants this year. So you guys have a little more time to plan for that. So just keep an eye out for that.
And just to summarize, Jim, so any partner could play that role. In this case, it was
Yes.
Trout Unlimited that played that role, but municipalities may want to do it themselves or partner with another org or use some of those methodologies.
Yes, and if you do want to do it yourself, I offer trainings as well on the NAC protocols. So if you do want to learn how to assess these protocols or assess these culverts, we can teach you how to do it.
Great, thank you. Colleen.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that to Steve that it was our municipality worked specifically with Cornell Cooperative Extension and Trout Unlimited together. So Trout Unlimited was mostly interested in mapping the cold water habitat for brook trout, and Cornell was interested in creating the inventory document for us. So we kind of all worked together to be able to do both. So, and as a group, we applied to the Estuary program for funding. So that's kind of how that all worked together.
Great, thank you. And I just really appreciate having so many folks on the Zoom today. You know, these Lunch and Learn readings are really designed for this cross-pollination and Q&A and discussion. And so just really glad that so many people with different areas of expertise and experience on the issue of culverts are available to join us today. There's so many different funding sources. We've focused on a couple here, but you know, there's ripe with opportunities with the New York State Bond Act and available grants. So I want to zoom out a little bit and ask this question that came in the Q&A box. So both Nate and Colleen talked a little bit about some of the communications around this work and that this can be sensitive and it's important how you roll it out or communicate with landowners. And so for either or both of our presenters, what kind of messaging are you using about these projects? Do you focus on flooding? Is it an opportunity to broach climate change? I know in some contexts, it's really about the fish connectivity that's the primary driver. Just curious how you've approached communications and rolling out these projects.
That's a great question, Emily. In fact, I was going to raise my hand and I was going to add something about that because that's something that I don't know if I conveyed that well. You have to decide in your community or whoever you're working with what is going to catch their attention to make them, you know, realize that this is important. And in our community, probably the catch or the hook, we'll call it, was that we had failing infrastructure and it was undersized. And so that kind of helped us prioritize. Remember, we were just given a spreadsheet and with some, you know, categories in it. And so we started basically our triage of that spreadsheet was look for things that are undersized first. And then we were looking for things that weren't that were a barrier to aquatic organisms. That was how we were going to get our buy-in, and that's how we were going to get support from different, you know, entities within the town. It might be different for different towns. You know, other towns may be more interested in the aquatic passage, say, than the capacity of the culvert. So it's kind of finding out from a good way to start is with your highway department, because without them and without their buy-in, it's going to be very difficult. So find out what is important with them and then go from there. So that's the only advice I can give you with that.
I'll jump in on that as well. I think it is a great question, and it's actually one that I have some surprisingly positive feedback from. So when we were looking at this one particular culvert upgrade plan, we noted that we couldn't put it in the area that we had the easement for the existing culvert that is undersized because somebody had constructed a garage on our easement in the way of where the pipe ought to go. And as a result of it, we now need to reroute it a couple of feet to the north and have it cross across two other properties that we don't have an easement from. So we were thinking that one of the things when you talk about getting easements from property owners is that there typically is a monetary cost involved. And the property owner who we have the easement on that illegally built a garage on top of it, preventing us from doing the repair, was not really all that hospitable. We had Hurricane Ida and Henri come through in a 2 week period, and their whole backyard washed out, and they had some damage to their property, and they were mad at us for not having good enough culverts. So we went to them with this proposal to put a bigger culvert, and they said, well, it goes through my garage, so you can't do that. So they weren't very helpful. I've recently been in contact with the two other property owners that also had some damage on their property during those two events. And not only are they not asking for money, they've been very helpful and supportive of this and thankful that we're taking, efforts to improve our infrastructure and our stormwater management in the vicinity of their property. So I hadn't built in any costs for the easements when we applied for this grant. And that was one of the things that it was kind of an oh no moment. I started talking to the village attorney, and he said, well, they're probably going to want thousands of dollars for these easements. And I said, you know what? They had damage. They're reasonable people. They've seen it. We've got pictures and documentation. Can we just start the conversation with them without bringing up money? And that's where we started from. And the village attorney didn't think we would be successful, but everyone came back and said, yes, we would like to help. So I think there's a spectrum in terms of the communication and also in terms of the reaction. And I think it's important not to assume the worst or to assume that just because one person is mad and being unreasonable about something that everyone will be. At the end of the day, we are trying to make improvements to the management systems that serve our community. And we all have seen what happens when our infrastructure capacity doesn't meet the actual impacts of these, storm events that are increasing in intensity, duration, and frequency. And Hurricane Ida and Henri together in a 2 week period was a great example of that because both of those set records for the rate of rainfall in an hour and the rate of rainfall in a 6 hour period, both here in Rockland County and also throughout the region. So one of the things that, in terms of messaging, my work with the Waterfront Resiliency Commission, this has been an ongoing issue, and it's a little bit of a bummer. But what I can share is that when the skies are blue and the tide is out, nobody has any interest in having these conversations. You can talk to your blue in the face with whatever your messaging is, and they don't care. The minute it starts raining through their house, they care a lot. And so one of the other things that I'd like to have in terms of my previous comments about pre-planning and having things on the shelf and in the queue is that if you are set up in that way, if you have projects that you'd like to pursue that maybe you need a little bit of a boost in terms of community support in order to, move forward with, you need to strike when the iron's hot. So if you have those things on the shelf, when there's a storm, when there's damage, when people come out of their shells and say, okay, I'm ready to talk about this for a period of time, that's why you need to have things on the shelf, because you can go to your residents and say, hey, listen, we're not, useless here. We have been working on these things. We have things we'd like to move forward with. We need your support in doing that. And they will be much more receptive to that when it's fresh in their mind, what happened when it rained, 6 inches in 2 hours last week. So that's another reason to always have things stacked up that you could move forward with, is that is strong messaging to have. When people are dealing with the aftermath of an event, they feel helpless. They're not sure what you can do, what they can do, what can be done, who's going to come in and save them. And I think it's really important for a municipality to not be caught flat-footed in that situation and be able to reach out to people in the community and say, okay, here are things we're working on. Here are things that could happen in the future. Here are things you yourself can do.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nate. That dry weather planning for the striking while the iron is hot or the flood levels are high, to get that implementation going forward, that's really important. And Jared, I saw your hand go up. I was going to call on you too, see if you had anything to add.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to add too. So NAC has added a culvert condition module for their assessments, which there's training for that now. And I know previously I've done a whole bunch of culvert replacement projects in the Upper Susquehanna watershed. And yeah, the municipalities, like the flood flow stuff, sure, that's fine. The aquatic organism passage, but they did really care about the culvert conditions. So it would be nice to get some folks trained in that and do it. It's pretty quick. It's like 2 pages. It's a lot faster than the NAC assessment. So, and then I will add as well. So I put a link on a mapper there that I'm working on, but I do have like estimated ideal crossing sizes based on bankful widths for the whole Hudson, as well as some rough heights. And Jim and I are planning on putting together some mappers and documents to help people rough size culverts as well as apply for grants. So um, more to come on that.
Great, thank you. And Colleen.
Two things. I have to echo what Nathan said. We have an actual completely designed on the shelf culvert for replacement that is ready at any time should we need to pull it out. We have it completely ready to go. And I think you're right. People tend to forget the impact that heavy flooding and this damage does until they're actually faced with it immediately. So we have something in the queue ready to go. It's set. And Jared, that is awesome to be able to do something like that, because I think a lot of like the local highway departments really could leverage that, because I think at this point, Jim, our highway superintendent, does the best he can. He's like, well, it's this size. I'm going to, make it 2 sizes larger, but he's kind of, shooting from the hip, so to speak, because he doesn't have anything that's easy to use that he can just kind of refer to. And so I think that would be really helpful, because shutting down a road for 4 to 6 weeks may not be an option, and they may want to do it in-house, if you have the capacity to do it. This would really help inform their decision on the size that they're going to use. So that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of the impetus of it. So it's like the bankful width more or less meets DEC bridge and culvert guidelines. I mean, it's rough. It's like not really, there's no engineering in it, but it gives at least some sort of idea. And our hopes are to pair that with. So I've done a whole bunch of culvert designs, permit applications, grant applications, and all that. And there's a lot of like kind of cookie cutter information that goes in each of those. So my thought was you could put that all on a GIS mapper, pair it with a document that you need the watershed size, all that stuff together in one spot. So, because yeah, I mean, I've seen some proposals come through where it's like $150,000 for a rough design for a culvert. And it's like, well, I could do that in like 3 days. Like, why is that $150,000? So we're trying to make it easier on municipalities and give them some sort of tools. So, but yeah, Jim and I will have another webinar here the next couple of months once I build out the mapper. So with the information that I talked about is on the link that I have there. And if people would like a copy of it, I have that as well. So yeah, as well as like ownership, there's a whole bunch of information, but trying to work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, that all sounds really, really valuable. Thanks, Jared. Jim.
I'll just add one more thing in that one of my roles here is to offer technical assistance. So if anybody does have a specific crossing that they're looking to apply to grants for, or if you just have questions about the grant application itself, feel free to reach out to me because I can help you answer those questions. I can't help you fill out the grant application, but I can help you figure out what should go in there. Or just what grants to look for. Because there are a lot of grants out there that have money available for this work. And like Emily mentioned, the Bond Act money is coming out, but it's coming out through existing grant programs. So just keep that in mind.
And Colleen, one quick clarifying question in the chat. When you said that those projects are ready to go, does that include the permits that are needed?
No permits yet, but I think we did pull up, it's probably expired, but we pulled one originally thinking that we might do it, but we didn't. But the designs are fully designed, everything's fully designed. And so it would just be a matter of pull the permit and start working on it. It's a strange crossing. It actually has a a 90-degree angle in the way the water approaches the actual water body. So it would involve realigning the whole crossing. So it's a little bigger, but it's designed and ready to go. So that would take that whole step out of the process, which is good.
Great. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. I know there's so many different points along as Jim said, the project pipeline of just understanding the conditions and planning for them and getting the municipality on board and getting the funding in hand and getting the permits acquired. There's just all of these different elements, but I hope you're all inspired by the great work that Ancram and Piermont have already done and many other communities in the Hudson Valley, and how many resources are available as well with folks like Jim, who shared his contact information in the chat. And, John, thank you for offering any support on those FEMA grants that might be helpful for folks too, and others. So, great. One more question in the chat. Do implementation grants typically require permits in advance of grant awards? So do you have to have those permits in hand before you apply? I'm seeing no.
No, but it's a good idea to have that at least started. So if there's any changes in sizing, et cetera. But yeah, most grants you don't have to have. It helps. I think you get additional points, but
And I'm seeing a thumbs up from John on the FEMA grants as well. Colleen, do you want to add to that?
I would just say that out of the whole thing, I think getting the permit was the easiest part of the whole process for us. I'll just say that. So that probably shouldn't be too much of a hang up for you, but especially if you're working with these great colleagues, that are there to help. That was by far the easiest part. So.
Great, thank you. We have just 2 minutes left, and yeah, we'll send a follow-up email with the links that were shared in the chat here. Are there any community updates? We try to always include a little bit of time for anyone who's joined to just share any updates related to municipal flood work, starting with our municipal members. Great. Or our regional partners, any updates that anyone wants to share? Or any comments or discussion related to culverts as well?
I'll just say, like Jared mentioned, we will have a webinar coming probably around at the end of May to further discuss this data and how it can be used for grant applications and design.
Perfect. So we'll keep everyone posted on the Flood Resilience Network email list when that webinar is open for registration, so you all can get more detail about using those great tools that are being developed. Okay, great. Well, thank you all again for joining us for the Flood Resilience Network Lunch and Learn today. Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Colleen, Jim, Jared, everyone who contributed to today's discussion. It really takes a village. We hope to see you April 9th on our virtual meeting for the USGS Stream Gauge Lunch and Learn as well. We want to thank the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Hudson River Estuary Program and New York State Water Resources Institute at Cornell with funding from the Environmental Protection Fund for supporting the Flood Resilience Network and this program. And you'll also be getting a feedback form when you close the Zoom link. So if you can take a moment and provide us with some evaluation feedback, we really, really appreciate that. It helps make these programs as fine-tuned to your interests and needs as possible. Great. Thanks so much, all. Look forward to seeing you soon.